Okay, I feel like this desolate wasteland is an extremely proper setting to ramble about the death of the natural world, as all these trees look horrifyingly witchy and gray, and these houses look like they are constructed by strange doll men who had never really seen a house before. Like, all the doors are usually in the wrong place or something. The windows look like they aren't meant to be opened. If a doll truly lived there, I mean, who would buy that doll? Anyways, that's the whole point. Fuck Iowa. But here we are, today. Like, it's impossible to make any philosophical claim anymore without first pondering the death of the world. Like, I don't know how else to put that into language. I mean that it is like a logical presupposition now. Especially for normative claims or moral claims. You can't ask what ought one do without now asking what ought one do now that the world is actually dying. All of the history of moral philosophy, like all moral thought and anything in literature and art, any sort of thought, I mean, all of it is kind of under the presupposition that there is a life that can be not perfected, but lived well. I don't know about anyone else, but from the time I was like 10 and saw An Inconvenient Truth in 5th grade, I've never thought that the possibility for me to live a life of splendor and just like self-benefit, I've never thought it would be possible. I've thought we already live in a time of crisis, and it's the fact that we've really just gotten like 20 years of advertisement buried in us now, essentially trying to convince us that everything is always normal, that this has always been the way it has been, that there isn't really an ancient history, and that this can go on forever. I don't really think people see this as the purpose of advertising, but I really think now advertising as like an institutional mechanism is far more about readying the world's mind for an inevitable sequence of catastrophe that it's really hard to define due to the relationship of, like, you know, ecological feedback loops. But those are nice. Whoa, golly, this is dangerous. But one must live in danger, I suppose, to really tell the truth and be honest, or whatever the fuck bullshit they tell people to study writing in college. Who knows? Nonetheless, the wildflowers that grow in the Midwest are starkly beautiful, and there's not many other places where you can find such a strange variety. Also, Today for the Ears is Maurice Ravel, just a collection of different pieces. I've always thought he was by far the most interesting classical composer, if anything, like the only one everyone now should listen to. I think his impact on music is a bit understated, but I don't know if we'd really have modal jazz without Ravel. It's a weird claim to make, but to me, he just sounds like Bill Evans. It's hard not to get off topic talking about the death of the world, and even I hate that phrase. I don't know what other phrase to use. Like, obviously the world is not dying. Obviously the funguses will evolve and new creatures will emerge within whatever new age or epoch becomes this atmosphere. Like, there will come a time where our industry will have to stop or will completely be powered by sun and wind, which I think is obviously the point of any society in like a universe.
In 1 mile, turn right onto East Fountain Street.
There you go. Now you know where I am. But I don't know. I don't know what else to call it besides a death. Obviously, history in a way is dying. And I don't mean it in like the Fukuyama, like, end of history way, because it's a political propaganda piece about the Cold War and about false notions of both communism and democracy. It's not really a war. They were both just different swaths of global oligarchy that honestly seems like they've just kind of coalesced, judging by the strange curiosity and paradoxical nature of a lot of the Syrian conflict and a lot of the things having to do with in and around the borders of Turkey and the countries up near in the Caucasus, which is a political crisis I know far, far too little about. But nonetheless, some of the things I've heard, especially
Turn right onto East Fountain Street.
seem as though the Russians and Americans have so many proxy groups that they are just functionally sometimes fighting each other and sometimes fighting against.
In 1.6 miles, turn left onto Fir Avenue.
My bad. Different organizations that are, funded by the American government will be fighting other organizations funded by the American government, or one might have a Russian ally. There's been stories like this, and I can't cite anything, but there's too much information they give us. It's kind of why I've always liked Brave New World more than Animal Farm, because it isn't really that they hide things anymore at all. They flood us with every notion possible so that we cannot really distinguish any color from gray. And that's where we're at now, which is honestly also why I'm so fixated with this apocryphal Christian bullshit. It feels like something that was legitimately kept and might be part of a larger economic history that is legitimately still buried beneath mountains of all flavors of shit. And I'm still digging through with my tongue, and it is so bitter and disgusting, all of the things you must learn to really come to terms with the fact that you're an American citizen, which starts in school. There's no way to actually, have a public education in this country without forcing children to constantly acknowledge that they literally are destroying
Turn left onto Fir Avenue.
parts of the world at all times, just residing within this infrastructure. That the colonialism is never ended. Softly, the whole point of history lessons in American education is to wean us into the acknowledgement that, yeah, colonialism didn't end, but it just changed. And now it's actually good.
In 13 miles, turn left onto North 2nd Street.
I don't really mind this weird house. All these weird houses. What will happen to this land? This is supposed to be some of the most fertile land in the country. And weed's been legalized in 2 Midwestern states now. My dad says Colorado's Midwestern, but it's not really. It's kind of its own place, I suppose. It's like Utah. But all this corn land and soybean land, all of the money, like the farmers are functionally contracted out by large agricultural companies. Which, by the way, for the most part, there's 5 agricultural companies that make probably about 70 to 80% of our country's agricultural yield every year. And they have all been in operation since around 1865, which, again, is when the Civil War ended. And I don't mean to suppose that a national conflict is necessary to ending streams of hegemonic power and then forming new ones. But obviously that's kind of what happened. The Civil War was entirely an agricultural and labor conflict. I mean that in terms of slavery, obviously, but the Southern economy and Northern economy had created a competition between themselves where the Southerners could only really compete with slaves. All of this, I really think, comes down to a kind of competition that compounds. And then once the Civil War ended, we get these companies that all, again, coalesce around the end of the real, like, industrial jack-off fest of the early 20th century. 20th century, my bad. Into, like, conglomerations of groups that, I mean, like, the entire political era from, like, 1890 to 1915, basically, was about, until World War I, was about busting up the trusts. And it didn't really happen. Like, we got a few. Standard Oil got busted up, but we still have Exxon, which is still owned by the same families and their same, like, history. Like, it's not detached or severed at all from the octopus in that cartoon that we were all shown in, like, AP US history or whatever, with the Standard Oil Trust, you know. That's what Theodore Roosevelt's famous for. But I think something that, I mean, I guess the guys on Chopper Trap must have talked about it, but Theodore Roosevelt really was like a lighter option. You know, he was like the liberal moderate, more so. I mean, he ran in a progressive party, so what I'm saying is immediately ironic, but like, he was running at probably the most active time of like actual American socialism, at a time when you had like a U.S. city like Milwaukee had a socialist city council functionally, and was implementing like a lot of progressive economic policies that today would make some silly people go cray on the internet. And I don't know, it's kind of strange to think that maybe certain types of politics were much more ahead of what we're thinking and doing now in like the early 1900s. But Theodore Roosevelt still, I mean, he's an imperialist, as is Joe Biden, as is Obama. I think Theodore Roosevelt was probably a cooler person and even a more progressive politician than Joe Biden, even though he might be more vividly imperialistic, because we don't really get to see the images of the children and families that are being massacred at our capital behest in Yemen, or the direct attack that our great leader put out upon Syrian civilians that killed something about 20 people a few weeks ago that just got washed away immediately with some other media spectacle. Donald Trump really taught the media how to use the circadian rhythm of people and the circadian idiocy of the day-to-day being of driving around. Nonetheless, again, I don't know what to call it but a death. All the birds are dying, the bugs are dying, the air is clearly becoming poisoned in certain places because of all of the things we do. We cut down the trees in places. Like, a really horrifying example is the Amazon, and the fact that there isn't an American movement to literally go down there and just help them occupy it and keep it safe, which obviously sounds like it would lend itself to a terrible kind of a gentrified mindset, which might even be another form of the weird baby boomer imperialism we see with the weird ayahuasca fetishism in the tech community. That was very specific. I have a dad. We won't say more. Weird one too. Look at those trees though. It's strange how the spookier trees seem to blossom later. Maybe that's just because they blossom later. I think they're spooky. Maybe all trees are spooky if they don't have leaves. God damn. This music sounds like Star Wars wanted to fuck itself. I'm crazy. Beautiful. And to say the world is dying, you're immediately like grammatically trapped in like a literal Chicken Little statement, which is never fun. So sometimes I pretend to use Christian language just to get around this, because again, Christianity is entirely about an end of the world more than anything else. More than it's about Jesus, it's about the inevitability of the end of the world, in the same way that Hinduism is, and all of its myths, I mean, joke about death in such a way that in Western literature is very foreign, you know, kind of our notion of Christianity, death is very dirgy and somber. But the circle of it all, that's the point of all the religions. It's the metaphorical point of reincarnation. Like, you never get rid of the matter and you never get rid of the energy. That's the point of the third law of thermodynamics. They're not separate at all. There's just different languages to express them that had different periods of time and different frames of reference for the words. But nonetheless, we keep saying the same things. We keep pretending we're doing anything interesting at all. And we are losing all of the vast beauty that we do not metaphysically value anymore. If anything, that's the real importance of any sort of religious notion. It's like the sacredness of this place, and how little we actually still understand about it, and how we don't even know how statistically important this biological mass and structure and going on might be. And honestly, because of these machines, we are contributing and doing less and less and less. We have far more capabilities than ever before. And all of this is being used solely to keep us in like an umbilical relationship with light images. As the light images referentials die, literally. I keep telling people that like there will be a day in our lifetime where animals will literally become myths again. I don't know how to express how horrifying that is to me. And I don't really know what to say about it else. But all I meant was like there is no ought. There's no what if outside of what are we going to do when all the animals die? And again, I mean that somewhat poetically, because obviously they won't all die. And we could probably all die before some other animals. But there will come a time where this cornucopia we bask within will turn gray in dusk. And we'll have to vastly change what we're doing. Like, we should be reshaping everything in preparation for this catastrophe. Everything. There's nothing to undo anymore. We need to construct an entirely new world. And all of our politics are, reparational, which I completely understand. I think the city government of Atlanta should be entirely black and Hispanic, for instance, for like maybe 10 years. Makes sense. And then, who knows what happens then. Maybe the guy from Run the Jewels can join. But, ooh, look at these beasts. I don't know. I just feel like this isn't even talked about enough. Like, we hear about climate change all the time, but it's never talked about as a preface. Like, before action, before all action. Like, there's nothing else to concern politics or government towards. We know what these cars, what these roads, what this really stupid, fake, individualized relationship to the earth does. It makes people unhappy, and it literally kills the air. It makes the water undrinkable in our rivers that were once places people came together and bathed and drank. It makes everything worse. Literally, everything will get worse. Certain places might become more lush. I don't know. But what are we doing, y'all? We are already in the apocalypse. All that word means is revealing. It's been revealed. The greed is what destroys the earth. It's the truth in all religions. It's like hard to even put mystically. We're already within the apocalypse. I hope that you make good decisions as to how to live out this strange death that we are all contributing to in our compliance. Complicity and silence. Toodaloo.